Every studio owner wants people walking out of class thinking, that was amazing. I can't wait to come back. You want them talking about it in the parking lot, texting a friend about it later, posting about the instructor, and rearranging their schedule so they can come back next week. You know the kind of class I'm talking about. Members linger afterward instead of rushing out the door. Or maybe you hear a member telling someone else who wasn't there, you missed a really great class today. But did you know that most studios don't actually design for any of that? You may develop great workouts, hire amazing instructors, and train them to coach well. You invest in the space, the equipment, the sound system, the lighting, and then you hope that all of those pieces add up to an experience people remember. And sometimes they do. And you'll get one of those classes where the room feels electric and everybody leaves talking about it. But let's be honest, it's inconsistent. And if you can't explain exactly why that class became so memorable, you can't reliably create another one like it. And there's a much bigger business opportunity here than it sounds like, because when a class becomes memorable, it becomes something people actively seek out instead of passively consuming. They come back for it. They talk about it. They bring other people with them. And over time, that can mean stronger retention, more referrals, and a much longer relationship with your studio. Because as it turns out, you can actually design for remembering. You can design for the kind of experience people want to talk about afterwards. You can design for a class that stays with someone long enough that they want to come back and feel it again. But first, you have to understand how people actually remember an experience. So in this video, I'm going to show you which moments matter most and how to intentionally build them into your class experience so you have more members walking out of class raving about it. Hi, I'm Shay, co-founder of Fitcarma, where we help fitness studio owners and entrepreneurs build a brand that moves people, a brand people choose beyond the workout. My husband Barry and I have helped build some of the most iconic fitness brands around the world, him on the brand strategy side and me on the experience design side, helping studios clarify their brand architecture and bring it into life through the experiences they create. Because the brands people stay loyal to don't just offer classes, they architect journeys for their clients to experience real transformation. So if you want people to actively choose your classes, talk about them, and keep coming back for them, you first have to understand what actually makes an experience stick in someone's memory. Because your members are not remembering a class the way your instructor delivered it. They don't walk out with a perfect recollection of the warm-up or every exercise, every transition, every coaching cue, and every song. Human memory doesn't give every part of an experience equal weight. Instead, research shows that there are two moments that can have a disproportionate influence on how we remember an experience as a whole. The moment we feel the most and the way the experience made us feel at the end. Psychologists call this the peak end rule. And for a studio owner, this is incredibly useful because it gives you something concrete to design toward. At Fitcarma, we call it the 2-moment rule. If you want your classes to be remembered, talked about, and actively sought out again, you need to intentionally design the emotional peak and the ending. The first is the moment of greatest emotional intensity, the moment during the experience when someone feels the most. The second is the feeling they carry out of the room, the feeling they're left with when the experience is over. So think about how different that is from the way most class formats are developed. You may spend a ton of time thinking about what should happen across the 45 or 60 minutes, the movements, the sequence, the equipment, the timing, maybe even the music, and your instructors hopefully put even more thought into how they personally deliver it. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that only these 2 moments matter. The entire experience should be designed with intention. The programming, the progressions, transitions, coaching, music, and the emotional arc all create the conditions for these 2 moments to land. We spend a lot of time in our other videos talking about how all of these elements come together to create an exceptional class experience. You want to think of the workout as the raw materials. The experience is what you make from those raw materials. Movement, music, coaching, effort, energy, environment, and the people in the room are all ingredients. None of them are necessarily remarkable on their own. What people feel comes from how those elements are brought together. but your member still doesn't walk away storing all 45 to 60 minutes with equal importance into their memory. Certain moments become the story of the class, and these two moments do very different jobs. One is a moment we call convergence. The other is a moment we call resolution. The first is the emotional peak, the point where movement, music, coaching, effort, and the energy in the room come together to create the strongest emotional moment of the class. The second is the ending, the moment that closes the loop and shapes the feeling the member carries with them when they walk out the door. And if you learn how to design those two moments into your class formats, you stop leaving one of the most valuable outcomes of your member experience to chance. You can start designing the kind of class that people remember, talk about, and actively want to come back to. So let's look at these two moments one at a time. The first moment, convergence, is the emotional peak. Picture the room 25 minutes into class. The participants are immersed and challenged. Their attention has narrowed. The outside world has started to disappear, and you can see some of them beginning to drop into a flow state. Then the next song in the playlist starts to build, and its musical peak lands at the exact moment the instructor's coaching changes, and they say that one thing the room needs to hear that's connected to the music and the movement. Maybe the cue helps someone recognize something about themselves. Maybe it connects the work they're doing physically to something they're navigating in their life outside the studio. Maybe it simply gives them permission to believe they can do more than they thought they could. Whatever it is, something shifts. They feel a surge of energy. The collective energy in the room rises, and for several seconds, the movement, music, coaching, effort, and emotion are all communicating the same thing. That's your peak. But here's what studio owners and instructors often misunderstand. The emotional peak is not automatically the hardest part of class. It might be. Difficulty can contribute to it, but difficulty by itself is not enough. Your members have done hard exercises they barely remember, or remember for all the wrong reasons. They've also had moments of laughter, mastery, connection, courage, release, and self-recognition that I promise you have stayed with them for years. The peak is the moment that carries the most emotional weight. In one class, that might happen during the first major physical peak, after the warm-up, after the build, when the entire room suddenly finds another level together. In another class, it might be the moment a member completes something that they were certain they couldn't do, or it might be the instant an instructor's words connect the physical work to a larger belief about who that member is or who they're becoming. That's why two classes can contain almost identical programming and leave people with completely different memories of them. What creates that memory isn't one great exercise. It's convergence. Several elements that are often treated as separate parts of the class reach the same emotional destination at the same time. The movement supports the feeling. The music amplifies it. The coaching gives it meaning. The instructor's energy tells the room how they're supposed to meet that moment. Even the lighting, the transitions leading into it, and the people around them can reinforce what's happening. Everything is working together to create this one moment. None of those elements can create the emotional peak on their own. The movement is just movement. The song is just a song, and the coaching is just language. But when they converge around the same emotional intention, together they can become something more than any of those pieces could carry by itself. That is a vastly different approach from just building a challenging section into the workout or choosing a high energy song to put underneath it and hoping that the room responds the way you'd like. And most studios don't actually decide what the emotional peak of a class is supposed to be. It isn't defined in the class structure. It isn't explained in the training manual. Instructors aren't taught what members should feel when they get there or which elements of the experience need to converge in order to create that particular feeling. So when a peak does happen, it's often because a really talented instructor instinctively recognized that opportunity and knew what to do with it. You've probably seen this inside your own studio. one instructor teaches a format and somehow the room comes alive, they know exactly when to say something and when to stop talking. When playlisting, they feel where the energy of the music should rise. They know when the room needs encouragement and where it needs space. Members rearrange their schedules to take that person's class. Then someone else teaches the exact same format, sometimes even the exact same workout, and somehow it doesn't feel like the same class at all. If the experience only exists inside one instructor's instincts, it isn't repeatable yet. It isn't something you can reliably teach to another instructor, protect when someone calls out sick, or build into the identity of the class itself. And most importantly, it doesn't belong to your brand yet. We use experience design to turn that instinct into intentionality. Now, there's one trap I want to point out, because once people understand the importance of the emotional peak, the first instinct is to think, great, let's make more of them. So they try to create 4 peaks, and then 5, and then every song is enormous. Every set is treated like the defining moment of class. Every coaching cue sounds like the final monologue in a movie. But the peak needs contrast. If every moment is presented as the most important moment, eventually none of them feels important. A class that consistently demands maximum emotional and physical intensity can become noisy, overstimulating, and eventually numbing. We call this the Mad Max effect. If you've ever seen Mad Max, you know this feeling. One enormous adrenaline-fueled sequence after another with almost no space to come down. And at first it's exhilarating, but after a while, your brain starts adapting to that level of stimulation. A class can do exactly the same thing. When everything is turned up to a 10, 10 actually stops feeling like 10. Your brain adapts. The moments that were supposed to feel huge stop registering the same way, and intensity loses its emotional impact. Attention drops, and instead of becoming more engaged, people start to check out. Apathy sets in, and now the whole intention behind the intensity, which was to help people rise to the challenge and get more out of themselves, starts to work against you. Because once someone has mentally checked out, they're far less likely to choose more effort, stay present through the discomfort, or push beyond the point where they would normally stop. The answer isn't more intensity, it's contrast. The goal should never be to keep the room at its ceiling for 45 minutes. The goal is to create an emotional arc that earns a meaningful arrival. That means the quieter moments matter tremendously. The transitions matter a lot. The teaching, repetition, gradual progression, and moments where members get to settle into the work all matter. They build trust, anticipation, competence, and momentum. They create the conditions that allow the peak to actually feel like a peak when it arrives. A peak can only exist in relationship to what surrounds it, right? You need quiet for something to feel loud. You need space for something to feel full. You need struggle for an accomplishment to feel earned. The valley gives the peak its shape. So when you're designing the structure of a class, the question isn't, how do we make this part harder? It's, what do we want members to feel here, and what has to come together for them to actually feel it? Then you build the format so the movement, music, strategy, coaching intention, energy, and everything else leading up to that moment are working toward the same destination. You create enough contrast for it to register, the right progression so it feels earned, and enough clarity that every instructor understands what they're trying to create without having to imitate one specific person's performance. That's convergence. You're not hoping a talented instructor produces a memorable moment. You're designing the class so a memorable moment has somewhere to happen, and every instructor on your team knows how to bring it to life. The second moment is the resolution, the end of the experience, and it has a completely different responsibility. If the peak creates emotional intensity, the ending creates resolution. It closes a loop. A member has just spent 30, 45, or 60 minutes being asked to move, focus, attempt, struggle, adapt, and persist. The ending helps them understand what all of that meant. It tells them what feeling to carry out of the room. Every experience changes our state in some way. Your members walk into your studio feeling one way, and 45 minutes later, they're walking back into their life feeling another. As a studio owner, you have an opportunity to decide what you want that shift to be and design the experience toward it. It doesn't have to be enormous. Maybe they came in feeling scattered and they leave feeling grounded. Maybe they come in feeling doubtful and they leave feeling capable. Maybe they arrived depleted and they leave feeling energized. Maybe they simply remember that they're stronger than they thought they were. Resolution helps them recognize that shift and gives it somewhere to land. Think about the difference between a class that simply stops and a class that has an ending. In one, the last hard set finishes, the light come up, the energy drops off a cliff, and the instructor starts cleaning up or checking their phone while people stretch. Everyone understands mechanically that the class is over, but emotionally, there's nowhere for the experience to go. In the other, the ending feels like it belongs to everything that came before it. The meaning can be shaped by a final cue, a particular song, giving your members the sensation of crossing a finish line as the final rep matches the end of the playlist, an acknowledgement, a breath, a ritual, a moment of stillness, or the way the instructor transitions the room back into the rest of their lives. It might leave them feeling calmer, lighter, more connected, more powerful, or more at home in their body. It might reinforce, these are my people and I belong here. That final emotional interpretation can color the memory of the entire class. Sometimes you can physically feel when the ending lands. The room stays quiet for an extra beat. People look at one another differently. They burst into applause and cheers without being prompted. Members linger instead of immediately reaching for their phones or running out the door. Someone walks up to the instructor afterwards because they need to tell them what the class meant to them. And those behaviors are important because they show you that the experience didn't simply stop when the movement stopped, and something stayed with the members as they went back into their day. Applause isn't the only signal, and it isn't appropriate for every kind of experience. A restorative or meditative class may resolve in stillness rather than celebration. The real question is whether your ending created the response your class was designed to create. A cool down is a programming component. Resolution is an emotional outcome. They are not the same thing. And in my opinion, there are far too many classes where the instructor completely throws away the ending and then they're on their phone before everyone is even out the door. But I don't only see that as an instructor problem. If you haven't defined how the experience is supposed to end, what that moment is supposed to communicate, and what you want members to carry with them, then you've left one of the most important moments in the class up to individual interpretation. You can choose physiologically appropriate stretches, lower the heart rate, and complete the class safely without ever giving the experience a meaningful ending. The body may understand the workout is over, but the person may have no idea what they're supposed to feel about it. A designed ending gives the experience a final point of view. It gives the member a chance to recognize what just happened, how they feel now, and what they're taking with them. And that should live in the class format itself. Your instructor should understand not only how the class technically ends, but what the ending is there to accomplish emotionally. They should know the feeling that they're trying to protect, what kind of language supports it, what kind of energy belongs there, and what would break that moment. It doesn't need to be scripted out word for word, and it doesn't have to be groundbreaking or dramatic. It needs to be deliberate. And that is resolution. And when you step back, there's really a larger opportunity for you as a studio owner. Most class formats clearly define what the members are supposed to do. The movements, the timing, equipment, training, stimulus, progression, that all gets figured out. Maybe they even get documented in extraordinary detail. But the emotional experience often stays inside the instincts of the instructor. And that's why you can have two instructors delivering what looks like the same product on paper, while members experience two completely different classes. One person knows when to speak, when to stop speaking. They feel where the music should rise. They recognize when the room needs encouragement and when it needs space. They know how to turn a difficult moment into a meaningful one. The other person may be following every programming standard you gave them and still not be able to create the same experience. That's not necessarily because the second one is a bad instructor. It may be because you documented the workout and never documented the experience. And that's where experience design begins. Exercise programming determines what members will do. Experience design determines how every element of the class works together to shape what members should feel, understand, and remember. Because again, the ingredients themselves aren't necessarily what make the experience extraordinary. What matters is how you pull them together and what that creates in the person who's experiencing it. And as a studio owner, your opportunity is to take those intentions and actually build them into your product. This should show up in the structure of your class, in your training manuals, in your instructor onboarding, in your coaching philosophy, in the way you observe classes and give feedback. Because if those moments only exist when you or your most talented instructor happens to create them, they don't belong to your brand yet. And that becomes a real business vulnerability. Members start building their relationships with the individual instead of with the experience your studio promises. They learn which names on the schedule give them the feeling that they want. And then someone calls out, goes on vacation, changes their schedule, or eventually leaves, and suddenly part of what your members thought they loved about your studio disappears. A great class experience shouldn't disappear when a great instructor leaves. Your goal isn't to turn every instructor into the same person or script every second of the experience. It's to give them a clear emotional destination and a thoughtful structure for reaching it in their own voice. Can a new hire understand the emotional arc of the class? Can they recognize where the peak belongs without being handed one rigid playlist or program forever? Can they create the intended resolution authentically while remaining consistent with the brand? Can your experience still work on a Tuesday morning with a substitute instructor and not only during a primetime spot when your most charismatic teacher has a packed room? Without the structure, consistency usually means standardizing exercises. With it, consistency means protecting the feeling the class is designed to give your members. And that's how an exceptional experience stops belonging to one exceptional instructor and starts belonging to your brand. So here's what I want you to do. Take one of your class formats and look at it differently. Don't start by looking at the exercises. Ask yourself, where is the emotional peak supposed to happen? Not where the hardest exercise appears, but where you want the members to feel the most. Then ask yourself what's actually converging at that moment. Are the movement, music, coaching, effort, and energy deliberately supporting the same emotional outcome? Or are you hoping the instructor happens to pull those pieces together? Next, look at the ending. What is it designed to resolve? What should a member feel or believe as they walk out the door? Is there something you want them to recognize about who they are, what they just did, or how they feel now compared to when they walked in? And what choices are available in the class experience that create that response? And finally, ask yourself whether every instructor on your team understands those two moments well enough to deliver them authentically. Could your newest instructor explain what those two moments are supposed to accomplish? If the answer is no, then some of the moments carrying the most weight in how your members remember the experience are probably still being left to chance. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Your members are going to leave your classes with a memory of them, whether you design that memory or not. They're going to remember something. They're going to attach a feeling to that experience, and that feeling is going to influence whether they talk about it, whether they seek it out again, and eventually whether your studio becomes something they actively choose or another workout that they could get somewhere else. So the question isn't whether your classes are creating memories. The question is whether your brand is deciding what those memories should be. That's what the 2-moment rule gives you. One moment of convergence, where the elements of the experience work together to create something worth remembering, and one moment of resolution, where the experience closes with intention and gives members a feeling worth carrying out the door. And underneath both of those moments is the same idea. The workout itself is only a part of the product. A class is made up of movement, music, coaching, challenge, environment, energy, and human connection. The power is in how those ingredients are intentionally brought together to create an experience people feel, remember, and want to return to. But the 2-moment rule is really just one example of a much bigger opportunity. There is decades of research into how people form memories, what captures attention, what creates emotional connection, what helps people enter flow, what makes every experience meaningful, and what makes people want to repeat them. We already know a lot about how human beings experience things. So why are we not using more of that knowledge to design fitness experiences? That's the question we've spent years working on at Fitcarma. Our experience design work takes principles from psychology, behavioral science, experience design, and the science of human performance and translates them specifically into the boutique fitness environment, not as a theory, as a system. We use those principles to help you make intentional decisions about the structure of your classes, the emotional arc, the music you choose, how you coach, how the transitions are done, the rituals, peaks, and endings that you include in your experience, and the role your instructors play in bringing that experience to life. Then we help you build those decisions into your business itself through your class formats, your instructor training manuals, your coaching standards, observation systems. We call it a playbook because knowing why an experience works is so valuable. Building a system that makes it work consistently is what turns it into part of your brand. So if you're a studio owner who knows your classes are good, but you also know how much of what makes them great still depends on which instructor happens to be teaching that day, I'd love to help you change that. Book a fit call with us through the link below. We'll take a look at the experience you're currently delivering, where the biggest opportunities are, and what it could look like to build a more distinctive, memorable, research-backed class experience that your entire team knows how to deliver. Your members are going to remember something. Let's design what you want them to remember and build the system that makes it part of your brand, so you know with confidence you're offering experiences your members can't stop talking about and will never forget.